Hello, and welcome to another hour at the Golden Hour, which is a chance for you and me to do whatever we want and do it together for an hour. So, I hope you have come here or found this video with perhaps something to do. Or if you're just stumbling across the videos, I hope this idea might inspire you to tune in for other ones. I'm here for companionship for an hour and to share ideas and things and people that I think are exciting and worthy. And yeah, I hope that that is somehow of service to you as you go about your daily life. So, what I have been doing is recapping the book Sapiens. So we continue to go on our recap adventure. I've finished the book, but we're just catching up on the recaps. Continuing with the hot chocolate. But today, although it is not at all autumn, can you resist this cute little hedgehog? No. So, the hedgehog it is. So, let's pick up where we left off. Oh, and let me try to remember. Well, the light isn't quite as bright. I was going to say today, but maybe it's just at the moment. Let me put that little notebook there. It seems to do better if it's open to something white, open to the pages. Yeah. So let's see where we left off. Okay, we're still in the chapter. Whoops. That didn't do anything. Okay, click my mouse. We're still in the chapter, and they lived happily ever after. He briefly talked about how, at least when it comes to the value of feelings, even Darwin and Dawkins might find common ground with St. Paul and St. Augustine. And he's saying so because he is writing, like Satan, DNA uses fleeting pleasures to tempt people and place them in its power. Okay, so then he goes on to talk about Buddhism. Let me read a couple paragraphs that I bracketed. The problem, according to Buddhism, is that our feelings are no more than fleeting vibrations, changing every moment like the ocean waves. If 5 minutes ago I felt joyful and purposeful, now these feelings are gone, and I might well feel sad and dejected. So if I want to experience pleasant feelings, I have to constantly chase them while driving away the unpleasant feelings. Even if I succeed, I immediately have to start all over again, without ever getting any lasting reward for my troubles. What is so important about obtaining such ephemeral prizes? Why struggle so hard to achieve something that disappears almost as soon as it arises? According to Buddhism, the root of suffering is neither the feeling of pain, nor of sadness, nor even of meaninglessness. Rather, the real root of suffering is this never-ending and pointless pursuit of ephemeral feelings, which causes us to be in a constant state of tension, restlessness, and dissatisfaction. Due to this pursuit, the mind is never satisfied. Even when experiencing pleasure, it is not content, because it fears this feeling might soon disappear and craves that this feeling should stay and intensify. I'm reading a little more than I bracketed. He says, people are liberated from suffering not when they experience this or that fleeting pleasure, but rather when they understand the impermanent nature of all their feelings and stop craving them. Skipping down, he says, when the pursuit stops, the mind becomes very relaxed, clear, and satisfied. All kinds of feelings go on arising and passing: joy, anger, boredom, lust. But once you stop craving particular feelings, you can just accept them for what they are. You live in the present moment instead of fantasizing about what might have been. The resulting serenity is so profound that those who spend their lives in the frenzied pursuit of pleasant feelings can hardly imagine it. And then I loved the analogy he puts here. It's probably my favorite analogy to sort of represent Buddhism that I've come across so far. It is like a man standing for decades on the seashore, embracing certain good waves and trying to prevent them from disintegrating, while simultaneously pushing back bad waves to prevent them from getting near him. Day in, day out, the man stands on the beach, driving himself crazy with this fruitless exercise. Eventually, he sits down on the sand and just allows the waves to come and go as they please. How peaceful. Such a good analogy. I have often thought of something similar, that sometimes when we're trying, to judge things as good or bad, I've often thought it's like trying to decide which is better, like a rising tide or a receding tide. Like this is pointless. Like they both exist, they both have their place. Anyway, so he goes on to say, Buddha agreed with modern biology and New Age movements that happiness is independent of external conditions. Yet his more important and far more profound insight was that true happiness is also independent of our inner feelings. Indeed, the more significance we give our feelings, the more we crave them, and the more we suffer. Buddha's recommendation was to stop not only the pursuit of external achievements, but also the pursuit of inner feelings. Okay, then skipping down. If this is so, then our entire understanding of the history of happiness might be misguided. Maybe it isn't so important whether people's expectations are fulfilled and whether they enjoy pleasant feelings. The main question is whether people know the truth about themselves. What evidence do we have that people today understand this truth any better than ancient foragers or medieval peasants? Scholars began to study the history of happiness only a few years ago, and we are still formulating initial hypotheses and searching for appropriate research methods. It's much too early to adopt rigid conclusions and end a debate that's hardly yet begun. What is important is to get to know as many different approaches as possible and to ask the right questions. So, let's see. What I wrote here was about that last paragraph. I like this approach for any emerging field, and I often think about it as it applies to consciousness studies. We're only starting this thing. It's much too early to adopt rigid conclusions and end a debate that's hardly begun. But what is important is to get to know as many different approaches as possible and to ask the right questions. Thought that was great. So then he concludes this chapter by saying, this is the biggest lacuna in our understanding of history. We had better start filling it. I had to look that up. I think lacuna was, like a gap or something like that. So again, I wrote, he's been building up to this question. I still find it fascinating that this huge history of people has sort of built up to the question of, are we any better off? Specifically, are we any happier? So then he's getting to, let's see, I think this is the last chapter, chapter 20, the end of Homo sapiens. So I think it's funny. He sort of uses, okay, let me read some more. This book began by presenting history as the next stage in the continuum of physics to chemistry to biology. Sapiens are subject to the same physical forces, chemical reactions, and natural selection processes that govern all living beings. Natural selection may have provided Homo sapiens with a much larger playing field than it has given to any other organism, but the field has still had its boundaries. The implication has been that, no matter what their efforts and achievements, sapiens are incapable of breaking free of their biologically determined limits. But as the 21st century unfolds, this is no longer true. Homo sapiens is transcending those limits. It is now beginning to break the laws of natural selection, replacing them with the laws of intelligent design. Next to which I just wrote, cheeky, because he's using the term here, intelligent design, intentionally, I assume, but intelligent design as a phrase that I'm familiar with, it refers to the idea of sort of that we need not eliminate the idea of God from what we know about the universe and evolution. Well, I've always interpreted it that way, that you could see evolution as God's intelligent design. Now I'm doubting that a bit. Maybe people also use intelligent design to say merely that everything was, created as it is, whether it evolved or not, by an intelligent designer. So I think it's cheeky that he's referring to us as the intelligent designers. Anyway. Oh yeah, then he talks about, this whole chapter makes me extremely uncomfortable. As I think it should all of us, but yeah, I'm nervous about where humanity is going. I'm not sure we're ready. And I think that's how he feels too. We have a lot of power at our fingertips, and I don't know that we're wise enough to use it well. So he talks about an artist, Eduardo Cac, a Brazilian bioartist, decided in 2000 to create a new work of art, a fluorescent green rabbit. Cac contacted a French laboratory and offered it a fee to engineer a radiant bunny according to his specifications. The French scientists took a run-of-the-mill white rabbit embryo, implanted in its DNA a gene taken from a green fluorescent jellyfish, and voila, one green fluorescent rabbit for le monsieur. Cac named the rabbit Alba, and I had to look that up too, which means dawn. It's like, oh no, we're at the dawn of a new era where we can do this stuff. I'm not sure. Oh, which he also kind of works into the sentence. He says, after 4 billion years of natural selection, Alba stands at the dawn of a new cosmic era in which life will be ruled by intelligent design. So here he sort of acknowledges the intelligent design movement. He said, biologists the world over are locked in battle with the intelligent design movement, which opposes the teaching of Darwinian evolution in schools and claims that biological complexity proves there must be a creator who thought out all biological details in advance. Okay, so I was right to doubt myself earlier. I was saying people use intelligent design to say God's intelligent design was evolution. And maybe some people do use it that way. But yeah, intelligent design is a little bit more in opposition with evolution. Anyway, he says the biologists are right about the past, but the proponents of intelligent design might, ironically, be right about the future. So then, of course, he goes on to say things like, it's not just pious monotheists who object that man should not usurp God's role. Many confirmed atheists are no less shocked by the idea that scientists are stepping into nature's shoes. And I just wrote, I don't love the idea. Yeah, like that makes me nervous. The prevailing feeling is that too many opportunities are opening too quickly, and that our ability to modify genes is outpacing our capacity for making wise and far-sighted use of the skill. Yes, is what I wrote. And then when I was talking to my husband the day I was reading this and just saying, oh, this whole thing makes me so nervous, like I don't love how much power we have. He, as he's wont to do, quotes a movie at me because he has way too many movie lines in his head. And to paraphrase a quote from Jurassic Park, he was saying, you were so preoccupied with the question of whether you could, you never stopped to consider whether you should. That's also why we need artists who can raise these questions before we're actually there. Thank you, Michael Crichton. All right, the result is that we're at present using only a fraction of the potential of genetic engineering. Most of the organisms now being engineered are those... oh, this made me laugh, are those with the weakest political lobbies: plants, fungi, bacteria, and insects. So that's good. He's saying we are scared enough to at least restrain ourselves some. The experiments we're doing are on those with the weakest political lobbies. And then he said, he talks about other experiments, and then says, a gene extracted from an Arctic fish has been inserted into potatoes making the plants more frost resistant. So for some reason, Alba over here, with her fluorescence, while wild, I was like, okay, like that's animal to animal. Like we're taking a gene from an animal, right? It was a jellyfish. Yeah, a jellyfish. And quite honestly, I just didn't really realize that you could take a gene from a fish and put it into a potato. He says later on, but geneticists do not only want to transform living lineages, they aim to revive extinct creatures as well. So he says, and not just dinosaurs, as in the Hollywood blockbuster Jurassic Park. So, could we do mammoths? I mean, a team of scientists has recently mapped the genome of ancient mammoths found frozen in the Siberian ice. They now plan to take a fertilized egg cell of a present-day elephant, replace the elephantine DNA with a reconstructed mammoth DNA, and implant the egg in the womb of an elephant. After about 22 months, they expect the first mammoth in 5,000 years to be born. Well, then it says, but why stop at mammoths? Next, blah, blah, blah. But why stop even at Neanderthals? Blah, blah, blah. Why not go back to God's drawing board and design a better Sapiens? Later on, he says, the cognitive revolution that turned Homo sapiens from an insignificant ape into the master of the world did not require any noticeable change in physiology or even in the size and external shape of the sapiens' brain. It apparently involved no more than a few small changes to internal brain structure. Perhaps another small change would be enough to ignite a second cognitive revolution, create a completely new type of consciousness, and transform Homo sapiens into something altogether different. So I don't know if he mean, yeah, so I think he's saying, what if we intentionally made that change, not just like waiting around for it to happen. And then he says, obviously, the main obstacles are the ethical and political objections that have slowed down research on humans. Okay, finally he says, it's unclear whether bioengineering could really resurrect the Neanderthals, but it would very likely bring down the curtain on Homo sapiens. Tinkering with our genes won't necessarily kill us, but we might fiddle with Homo sapiens to such an extent that we would no longer be Homo sapiens. Oh, then how much farther do we want to go? It's already been 17 minutes, and I have to make myself stop at 20, because 20 is plenty to hear me prattle on. He talks about bionic life. In a sense, nearly all of us are bionic these days, since our natural senses and functions are supplemented by devices such as eyeglasses, pacemakers, orthotics. Oh, here was something I didn't know. Retina Implant, a government-sponsored German company, is developing a retinal prosthesis that may allow blind people to gain partial vision. It involves implanting a small microchip inside the patient's eye. Photocells absorb light falling on the eye and transform it into electrical energy, which stimulates the intact nerve cells in the retina. The nervous impulses from these cells stimulate the brain, where they are translated into sight. At present, the technology allows patients to orientate themselves in space, identify letters, and even recognize faces. I had no idea that anything like that was going on. Amazing. Okay, then he goes on to talk about, translating our brain signals. Just saying, we might eventually be able to use technology to read other people's minds. No, is what I wrote by that. That sounds horrible, 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 horrible. Yet of all the projects currently under development, the most revolutionary is the attempt to devise a direct two-way brain-computer interface that will allow computers to read the electrical signals of the human brain, simultaneously transmitting signals that the brain can read in return. What if such interfaces are used to directly link a brain to the internet, or to directly link several brains to each other, thereby creating a sort of inter-brain net? What might happen to human memory, human consciousness, and human identity if the brain has direct access to a collective memory bank? In such a situation, one cyborg could, for example, retrieve the memories of another, not hear about them, not read about them in an autobiography, not imagine them, but directly remember them as if they were his own or her own. What happens to concepts such as the self and gender identity when minds become collective? How could you know thyself or follow your dream if the dream is not in your mind but in some collective reservoir of aspirations? And then I wrote, all this and parapsychology is unbelievable. Again, I find the scientific community's lack of regard for psychic abilities and parapsychology a little, well, lacking. Because, I mean, come on, you just told me about something really wild. Like, it's not the wildest thing to think that some people maybe have an ability to sense things that others don't. I won't get into it. Okay, that's 20 minutes. I hope... Yeah, tomorrow I should be able to finish recapping Sapiens. Woohoo! And then I will go back to recommending things as I've done before, because I still have plenty of a list of that. So, yeah, that should leave our timer about right. I'll just hit play on that and wish you luck with whatever you're working on. Ha! I'm reviewing I'm reviewing things in Sapiens to incorporate in a writing project that I'm working on. And I've noticed that throughout this book, I'm often making notes that he then gets to later in the book. Me! He says the agricultural revolution was history's biggest fraud. And I wrote, goodness, shouldn't this award go to the Industrial Revolution? Hello, he gets to that later. And then I said, or is it just same song, second verse? Yes, in many ways. Thinking. Exactly. I did it again, folks. I did it again. On page 83, I'm referring to something that he mentions in page 400. He says the currency of evolution is neither hunger nor pain, but rather copies of DNA helixes. And I said, makes me think a bit of the selfish gene. DNA is the ultimate driver of our behaviors and decisions. Which is exactly what he talks about later. Okay, so that is our hour for today. I hope you're happy with what you got done. Thank you for being here, and I hope to see you again tomorrow. Bye.